digging into a really significant book today, one that tries to make sense of, well, modern American politics.
Yeah, we're looking at Tim Alberta's American Carnage. The full title is On the Front Lines of the Republican Civil War and the Rise of President Trump.
And it's quite the title. Alberta spent, what, a decade covering this?
Yeah, something like that. Deep inside the Republican Party, talking to everyone. The book mentions over 300 interviews. So it's incredibly detailed.
Right. It's not just looking back. It's like anatomy of a fracture, how the party sort of cracked open from the inside.
Exactly. And how that created the perfect conditions for someone like Donald Trump to come in and basically take over.
So our goal here is to kind of trace that, understand the structural issues, the philosophical shifts, the economic problems over that decade.
That made Trump feel, maybe not surprising, but almost inevitable.
Yeah, inevitable. Okay, so where does Alberta start this story? It's got to be around the end of the Bush years, right? 2008, 2009.
That's the ground zero, basically.
Mm-hmm.
The GOP was in a terrible state. Bush was leaving office with, historically bad approval ratings.
Right.
And the party itself felt empty. Alberta calls it a power vacuum. There wasn't a clear next generation of leaders, no big new ideas. The base felt drained.
So like the author says, they'd kind of gone politically bankrupt, lost their way.
That's the term he uses, bankrupt, out of ideas, out of energy, out of trust.
And Alberta points to these like three huge forces hitting the country all at once, things the Republican establishment just wasn't ready for.
Yeah, and these are crucial. They really undermine that whole post-World War II Republican model. So first, you've got economic displacement. Think manufacturing jobs just vanishing.
Yeah.
Automation, outsourcing, whole communities hollowed out.
Right, the industrial heartland.
Exactly. Second, technological innovation, which sounds good, but it also meant the media landscape totally fragmented. No more gatekeepers. Echo chambers popped up everywhere. Extreme views got louder.
And the third, this massive civic upheaval. People losing faith in, well, everything. Congress, the media, the church, big business, all the major institutions.
So let's zero in on that bankrupt idea, the intellectual side. The GOP used to be about, expansionist, growth-oriented neoconservatism. That's Alberta's phrase, global markets, global policing.
Yeah, that was a brand for decades.
Why did that suddenly stop working for the average Republican voter around, say, 2008?
Well, it just became unsustainable. That vision, the neoconservative one, it demanded huge commitments overseas. Think about the wars in the Middle East. Years and years, lives lost, tons of money spent. People got tired of it. War fatigue.
That makes sense, the philosophical cost.
Right, and then there was the economic cost back home.
Yeah.
The party leadership preached free markets above all else, which meant, accepting that jobs would go overseas. Outsourcing was just part of the deal for global capitalism's greater good. So, wait, voters are seeing their kids maybe go fight overseas and their jobs disappearing here. And it feels like the benefits are all going to, elites, while income inequality just gets wider.
That's exactly the feeling. It's a really tough message to sell when people feel like they're sacrificing everything and getting nothing back. And the establishment, honestly, they seem kind of clueless about it. Well, there's this really interesting bit from Mitt Romney looking back. He admitted that the anger building up wasn't really about immigration, people coming in. It was much more about jobs going out.
That's a huge distinction, jobs going out. Why didn't Romney and the others see that earlier? They believed in free markets, sure, but didn't they see the damage?
They knew some industries would suffer, yeah. Auto, mining, things like that.
Yeah.
But the belief was, the long-term national benefit would outweigh that short-term pain.
Easy to say if it's not your town, I guess.
Exactly. For places like Lordstown, Ohio, when GM pulled out, that wasn't short-term pain. That was devastation. Jobs gone, house values plummeting, the whole community just gutted.
And you can imagine the anger, feeling like you were just acceptable collateral damage for some grand economic theory that didn't help you at all.
Absolutely visceral anger and, that kind of deep resentment, Alberta argues, that had been building for a long time, actively cultivated. Traces it back to the 90s. Newt Gingrich. Gingrich basically pioneered this really aggressive, take-no-prisoners style of politics, encouraging Republicans to call opponents traitors, radicals, really inflammatory language.
Wow, that sounds pretty extreme for back then. How did that change the party itself?
It shifted the goalposts. Winning wasn't about finding common ground anymore. It was about destroying the other side, politically speaking.
Priming the pump for polarization.
Totally. So when Obama came along, even with his talk about unity, he walked right into this super divided nation. Alberta says Obama kind of harvested all that anger, resentment, nativism, victimhood, stuff Gingrich had planted years before.
Okay, so Gingrich builds the playbook for hostility, but then Sarah Palin comes along. Alberta calls her the early warning bell for Trump.
Yeah, she was like the prototype. Her rise in 2008 really showed where the party was heading. Her whole thing was being anti-elite, anti-intellectual.
Right, she was popular because she seemed to thumb her nose at the establishment.
Exactly. The base loved that she was hostile to the way things were done in Washington, hostile to what experts considered, effective government.
It was like a shift from celebrating achievement to celebrating just being angry, grievance.
Yeah, Alberta describes it as moving away from glorifying excellence towards embracing anger and grievance and contempt. Palin channeled that populist rage really effectively. She was a rock star for being mad.
And that feeling, that anger, it just explodes with the Tea Party, right?
Oh, absolutely. The Tea Party movement was huge. And it wasn't purely grassroots, Alberta notes. It was a mix of big money, AstroTurf funding, plus real grassroots energy.
What triggered it specifically?
The 2009 stimulus package, the bank bailouts, that really lit the fuse. Suddenly you had hundreds of protests popping up on tax day in April 2009, all over the country. The energy was undeniable.
But the party leadership, the establishment Republicans, they didn't really get it, did they?
Not at all. They totally missed the boat. They saw these protesters as, like, fringe elements, kind of embarrassing.
Alberta quotes Senator Jim DeMint being angry about that.
Yeah, DeMint was trying to push the party rightward and was furious that his colleagues basically looked down on those people. They stiff-armed the Tea Party, he said. Just total arrogance. And it meant they completely ignored this wave building underneath them.
Which sets up the big clash, the Civil War, right? Starting when the Republicans take back the House in 2010.
Yep. John Boehner becomes Speaker, and he's immediately facing this massive new class of 87 Republicans, many of them Tea Party freshmen.
And Boehner tells them what? Campaigning is different than governing.
That was his message right away. He knew you needed compromise, incremental steps. But these newcomers, especially the Tea Party wing, they weren't sent there to compromise. They felt their mandate was, as some put it, to flip over the board.
Total gridlock waiting to happen. And you see figures like Jim Jordan really embodying that refusal to compromise.
Jordan is the prime example in the book. Some called him a legislative terrorist. Not because he wanted specific policy outcomes necessarily, but because he thrived on conflict. Government shutdowns, debt ceiling fights, these weren't tactics for negotiation. They were tools to prove leadership was failing. The system was corrupt. Disruption was the goal.
And nowhere was that fear of disruption, fear of the base, clearer than on immigration, right? Attempt after attempt failed.
Yeah, it was the killer issue for the establishment. Bush tried, McCain and Kennedy tried in 2007, then the big one, the Senate's Gang of Eight bill in 2013. Comprehensive reform, bipartisan support in the Senate.
But Boehner wouldn't even let the House vote on it. Why not?
He was terrified. He knew it probably could pass the House with Democratic votes. But he also knew his own conservative members would revolt. They'd see it as him betraying the base, overruling the majority of the House GOP. He thought they'd banish him, basically kick him out of the speakership.
Wow. So the leadership was basically paralyzed by fear of their own base on that issue?
Completely. And then came the ultimate proof.
Yeah.
Eric Cantor's primary loss in 2014.
Right. That was stunning. The House Majority Leader, expected to be the next speaker, loses to a total unknown, Dave Bratt.
By 6 points. And the key issue, Cantor had made some vaguely positive noises about principles behind DACA, the DREAM Act. Just talking about it was enough.
So the message was crystal clear. Touch immigration reform, even hint at it, and you're finished.
Absolutely. It sent a shockwave through the party leadership. No one was going to cross that line again.
Which means by 2015, the stage is perfectly set. The anger is there, the establishment is scared, the old rules are broken.
And along comes Donald Trump. He didn't invent the anger, Alberta argues. He just tapped into it. He used the Gingrich playbook of attacking the media, combined it with the Palin anti-elite mood, and harnessed the Tea Party's energy.
He synthesized it all.
Exactly. He spoke directly to the people who felt ignored and left behind for decades. Trump himself said later, "Nobody gave them hope. I gave them hope." He tapped into what Alberta calls the key ingredients: instinctual outrage, involuntary contempt, and this powerful sense of self-victimization.
Taking all that frustration about lost jobs, endless wars, and aiming it straight at the elites who presided over it all.
Precisely. And the RNC leadership, he saw the danger immediately.
What was their biggest fear?
The absolute nightmare scenario was Trump losing the primary but then running as an independent. That would split the Republican vote and hand the election to Hillary Clinton. Guaranteed.
So Trump had all the leverage.
Huge leverage. Remember that first debate?
Hmm.
Trump wouldn't pledge to support the eventual nominee. Priebus panicked. Alberta describes how Trump basically played him. He made Priebus, the chairman of the Republican National Committee, fly up to Trump Tower in New York, almost like begging just to get Trump to sign a loyalty pledge. It was a visual statement.
Showing who was really calling the shots.
Yeah, Alberta says it proved Trump had cornered the GOP. He owned them.
And this all leads to Paul Ryan's realization. Ryan, who represented that more traditional, policy-focused republicanism.
Yeah, Ryan had this whole vision for reform conservatism, but he basically had to admit defeat. He just said, simply, Donald Trump sort of overtook things.
Overtook things, like a force of nature that swept away the old guard.
That's pretty much the conclusion. The establishment's failures on the economy, on foreign policy, on just listening to their base created the opening. Trump wasn't just a candidate who could win in that environment. Priebus himself admitted later he was probably about the only person who could have won that race.
Because he spoke the language the base now understood, the language of anger and grievance.
Exactly. He was the ultimate expression of that anti-establishment, anti-elite fury that had been building for years.
So looking back at American Carnage, the core message seems to be this internal collapse. Philosophical, economic failures, leading to this embrace of anger over ideas, which paralyzed the leadership.
Right. The establishment couldn't or wouldn't fix the underlying problems. And figures like Boner and Cantor learned the hard way. You couldn't challenge the base's anger. So the path was clear.
It really was a civil war, and it left deep scars. Alberta includes this really sobering thought from Boner near the end.
Yeah, after they failed to repeal the Affordable Care Act, even with control of everything, Boner was apparently reflecting on the chaos he left for Paul Ryan. He wondered what historians would say about it all.
And his conclusion, what did he think they'd say?
His answer, according to Alberta, was chilling. They'll be talking about the end of the two-party system.
Wow, the end of the two-party system. That's
Right.
profound.
It really is. So the question for you listening is, when future historians look back, will they pinpoint this period, this Republican Civil War, detailed in American Carnage, as where that potential collapse truly began?